good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're listening to this. If you're live, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Jamie Kunkle. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about eating seasonally to support your healing. I'm a practicing naturopathic doctor. I also have a master's in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine and have practiced for several years integrating Eastern Western medicine philosophies. I've been with Gordon Medical Associates since 2021. I will talk about sensitivity responses in food today, of course, because the majority of my patients kind of deal with some level of that. So don't worry, I will get to that as well. A little bit about myself in the bottom there, for those who don't know. I love my little farm. So this is the disclaimer. I usually say this. Yeah, I am a doctor, but not your doctor. So just take everything I say with a grain of salt, but also just talk to your medical professional providers and discuss any recommendations with them before changing anything in your world. This is for information only. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to talk about eating seasonally, as the title suggests. I'm also going to talk about ways you can eat more locally, ways you can eat more for your constitution, who you are, kind of maybe your tendencies. We all have our tendencies, strengths, weaknesses, or adversities. I'd like to say adversities more so. The things we have to work a little harder on, maybe. I'm going to talk a lot about traditional Chinese medicine philosophies. So the concept of yin and yang. It's yin, not yin. And other traditional Chinese medicine concepts. And I will integrate Western medicine or Western herbalism a little bit as well, but the Chinese system is super rich in this discussion. And of course, I'm going to talk about sensitive constitutions and mast cell disorders and all that good stuff too. And I'm going to give you some resources at the end. I had some really gracious people. They reached out to me even and were like, hey, I have this cool book, or here's a good website for CSAs. And I'm like, great, I'll put that in the end. All right, let's just get into it. So general concepts, I'm going to talk about yin and yang quite a bit. So here's just sort of generally how we look at them. Yin literally means the dark side of a mountain. It's sort of representing sort of a stillness, moisture, cold, substance of the body. That can be even blood, nutrients, just what we have that gives us the potential for energy. So hydration, water, all that good stuff too. Maybe more parasympathetic nervous system response if you're talking about autonomic function, because we'll talk about autonomic function probably. Yang, on the other hand, is the light side of the mountain. It's kind of more fiery, movement, motion, activity. So you need to have both of these in order to be a living being. You need to have the resources, which are in. You need to have a stillness, which is like sleep or not being constantly in motion. But you also need to be in motion in order to breathe, to live, to work, to do everything you need to do. So these are just general philosophies and concepts that I'll come back to. And they have a deeper meaning than this, but this is just sort of a general representation. So constitutional assessment. So I think we all do this to some degree. As we practice longer, we see patterns in individuals that come through our door. It's like, oh, that's more of this type of constitution. That's a person that maybe has a tendency toward anemia or something. They need to eat more red meat or something. They seem to get fatigued very easily and have, look really pale or something like that. And that's just an example. But all the doctors are doing that. We just don't put labels to it all the time because we don't like to label people. But in traditional Chinese medicine, there's a lot of labeling for these constitutional patterns, and they are often broken down into the concepts I just mentioned of yin and yang. So in deficiency constitutions, I feel like I fall into this. I don't know. They're kind of like people like me. They're kind of like more skinny, stringy people, tend to have a lot of fire, a lot of excitement in their life. They don't have exactly rooted yang energy. Their yang is just going all over the place all the time. So they're super excited people. But over time, that can become a problem. They tend to do worse with hot stuff. They get hot very easily too. They don't like spicy foods, all those kind of things. Yang deficient people, though, are more slow, sluggish. They may have a hard time losing weight. They're very cold all the time. They do better with warm foods and tend to be drawn to that. And then I kind of abbreviated some of these other ones, but I didn't go into the concept of qi, but qi is sort of a yang function in some ways. It's a sort of energetic process, a movement in the body too. And so if you don't have these substances that you acquire through food, which that's where qi and blood kind of comes in, it comes to, is your body able to take the things that it needs from the environment and then turn them into actual usable energy? So qi and blood are kind of like that. Qi is more like yang. It's more about functional energy and functional motion and movement. And blood is more about substance, nutrient substance. So you can have a tendency toward deficiencies in those things. Maybe your gut is the problem. Maybe you're not assimilating things as effectively. I'll talk about the Chinese organ systems that sort of are related to that. Also, the flow of energy can also get stuck in your body. And so you can also have stagnation constitutions as well. And then there's this concept of damp and phlegm. I'll kind of go into it maybe a little bit more later. But people that have damp tend to have a lot of obstructions in their body. That may manifest as pain, like they have a lot of stuckness, and that can come in many different forms. And if there's heat with it, they're going to have more like cystic acne or something like this. So like really red, weepy, skin manifestations possibly. And the same thing could be happening in their gut, just skin's an outward appearance that you can see pretty easily with these types of things. So you can read through this. This isn't a traditional Chinese medicine class, but you can read through it and follow me, hopefully. So what are the organs in traditional Chinese medicine? So they have names that are translations basically to the Western organ systems, but they're not exactly the same. They kind of include some of the aspects of the Western organ as we know it, but they have all these other energetic qualities as well. So the heart is the element of fire. The season associated with the heart is summer. The color is associated with the heart is red. It houses the spirit or the shun, the mind. It's associated with, you think about it with like sleep and sort of our processing of the day, our dream state, and our conscious mind during the day. So they say somebody with a good heart, kind, pleasant minded individual, possibly. But you still have the normal functions of the heart being included here, pumping blood and doing all that really important, vital stuff to our life. The liver element is wood, color is green. You can read through that. I think the liver, aside from processing toxins and all the things, it also kind of processes emotion. So a lot of depression, anxiety, even with toxin illnesses or premenstrual syndromes, different things like this, have a lot of liver qualities to them too. Things get very stuck. It's supposed to help the free flow of energy in the body. The kidneys are your root of your yin and yang. They have a lot of very important functions. They come into play a lot of times with hormonal transitions in our life too, like menopause and that kind of thing, aside from their normal, kidney functions. The spleen is a very important organ in Chinese medicine. It really envelops the entire gut and digestive system, stomach and the spleen, but the spleen's like the dude for assimilating the food that you eat, processing and assimilating, separating the good stuff from the bad, so to speak. And it's the root of all your immunity too, generally. The lungs kind of represent the lungs as we know them, but also our protective qi or our protective immune system response. And in elemental theory, the spleen is what feeds the lungs. The element of earth feeds the element of metal. So what that really means, honestly, is just that, the state of your digestive system is incredibly integral for your immune system function. Goes without saying. I think we could also agree with that even in Western philosophy, those in the know. Okay. And then general philosophy of Chinese medicine and dietary therapy is much like traditional naturopathic medicine too. The body as a whole, the environment interfaces with the body to form an organic whole, the microcosm and the macrocosm, the internal system as we know it, and the environment around us and how those interface. The mind and the body are one. They're not separate. Well, yeah. So the goal is to harmonize those interactions between the body and the immediate environment in which you live. Consider the Constitution, follow these general principles. Let's get to food. What are the 5 flavors? Oh, that's kind of fun. So in Western medicine, sorry, not in Western medicine, but rather Western culture, we tend to be drawn most to sweet and salty. So a lot of our stuff is really in the sweet and salty plane. That being said, we do dabble in the spicy, some of us. Sour, I don't really see as much in the forefront, although you might think like grapes or citrus or something like that. And bitter is missing a lot in most standard American diets, but I'll tell you why bitter is important. But here's some information on the different flavors. Salty is associated with the kidneys. It's regulating, purging. Sweet is associated with the spleen. It's very nourishing and tonifying, as they say. Sour is astringing, holding things in, moving, associated with the liver. Spicy is associated with the lungs, moving and dispersing. Bitter is associated with the heart. And colors. So when you're choosing foods, if you want to target a specific organ, you can also pick a color, and that color corresponds to that particular organ too. It's quite interesting. So red colored foods might be more heart, like a red kidney bean. Kidneys, black, maybe a black bean while I'm on the bean subject. The spleen, yellow, squash, stuff like that. The lungs, white, radish, daikon radish, for example, or pear, good examples. Liver, green. Yeah, there's some green, a lot of green foods out there. Vegetables. Let's just say broccoli though for fun, because that's really good for the liver. Hot or cold, preparation matters. So if it's just a raw food, it's going to be really cold. And there's a lot of talk about not eating cold and raw foods because the body has to spend more energy in breaking down those foods. And that a lot of people that have chronic fatigue may, have the yang deficiency that I mentioned before, and taking too much cold stuff or cold and raw foods may not be good for that particular constitution. The more food is prepared, the warmer it gets. So if you stir fry it, it's warm. If you bake it, it might be even a little warmer. And then you slow cook it, barbecue it, super warm. So also it becomes easier and easier and easier to digest as you do that, understandably. And then you can add condiments and things to make things warm. You can add cream, fat, oils, or other things to make things colder, for example. So you can manipulate the foods that you eat to make the energies more resonant with the individual, in other words. So maybe I don't do as well with heat. I need to cool things down a little bit. So I'm going to add, I'm not going to over prepare, and I'm going to maybe add some cooling, foods with my meal at the very least. And it's all about balance. If you do too much of any of these flavors, you could damage the system. As you can imagine, too much spice would burn out the fluids. It's very dispersing, very moving, very dry, has a little bit of a drying quality. Too much bitter could be too cold, could cause dampness, could damage the digestive system or the spleen. Have you ever eaten too much of anything that's bitter? You can feel a little weird. Even coffee, like on an empty stomach, very bitter. Yeah, you can have little rumblies in the gut, possibly, among other things. Too much salt, yeah, fluid retention, that's an obvious one. Can be too draining and so forth. Sweet can cause dampness, sour is too drying. And so let's get to the seasons, because that's really what you're here to hear about. 2 hears. Here. Okay, so this is the overview. They actually have 5 seasons in Chinese medicine, which is interesting in history there. Summer and late summer, so they're 2 summers basically. But a lot of places in China, the late summer, the rains come and it gets really damp and just the environment shifts, very humid. Whereas some places like, say, the East Coast, where I'm from, it's really humid earlier in the year, then it becomes dry in the later part of the summer. Drier, let's just say. It could still rain, of course, with these hurricanes. So that's kind of the idea. So summer is the season of growth. It's the most yang time of the year. You're supposed to be very active during that time, and you're not supposed to also overeat too much. So we'll get to that and explain that a little further. I'm going to kind of lump in late summer, but as I mentioned, it kind of is circumstantial with the environment and how they sort of described the damp season. So I'll talk about the damp season and seasons, honestly, because it can happen in more than one season. Fall is the time of harvest, of course. It's the time where we're starting to prepare for winter too. So we're supposed to calm down a little bit after that summer energy rises. Winter is a time of reserve. It's a time to replenish and to be more still, to not overwork, to not overexert yourself. Spring is a time of birth. It's a time of revival, waking back up. It's like you could be really subdued in the winter. Spring comes, of course, you're going to want to start to get a little more active and really prepare for summer then. So it's all just a flow of energy. It's also the best time to detox, spring. That's when your body naturally does a lot of that as it's starting to move and mobilize things. But that's the best time if you're going to go with the flow of nature. So summer, let's jump in. It's time for growth. It's the Zhang. So what is the philosophy of summer? As I've mentioned, it's the highest yang time of the year. It's the time where you can usually be more active and sleep less and be cool with that. You have much more energy reserve. If you are a yang deficient person, summer is also the best time to try to tonify yang, not to overexert so much, but to maybe use yang promoting foods, which I'll explain, but also to maybe work on a exercise regimen, even if it's a slow graded exercise regimen, if you have chronic fatigue or something like this. But don't overdo it. I'd say that all the time, but definitely in the summer, there's an inclination to overdo it because you get these big bursts of energy, because that's the nature of summer. But you have to listen to your body too, of course. And also don't eat too much hot or too much cold foods in summer, because both can be detrimental theoretically, because it's already hot. So you're accentuating hot. You're eating cold foods because it's hot, but then you're over colding yourself. Sitting in an air conditioner, eating ice cream, ice water, all of it can damage the spleen or the digestive system, or maybe the acid production of the stomach, according to the Western model. So what are some summer foods? Lighter meals, easier to digest is sort of the general concept. Bitter foods, those are cooling. They can support the heart too. Summer is the time of the heart. These are just some examples of bitter foods, because we don't have a ton that we think of immediately in our society. But you can do more raw stuff in the summer too. And a lot of vegetables, when they're in their raw form, have more of a bitter quality. So there's a lot you can do there. But you could also just use regular herbs like Swedish bitters or gentian or something like that as well. So just do that before your meals. The bitters help promote digestive function, digestive enzyme production, motility, movement, motion. So summer is a great time to use bitter, especially before your meals. So you do smaller meals and you get some bitters in there, and then you go back outside and run around, I guess, because that's what summer's all about. And then cooling things, you could imagine how awesome a watermelon may be in the summer. Very hydrating, very cooling. Citrus, lemon, lime, cucumber, all that yummy stuff. And you're not supposed to overeat all the meat and fatty, spicy, hot foods, unless you're really yang deficient. If you're really like a cold, sluggish sort of constitution there, yeah, then go for it. Probably is okay. And I already mentioned don't overconsume any of these particular things, damp and cold. Autumn, it's time for the harvest. That's where we're at right now. I don't know about anybody else, but I love autumn. I love fall. One of my favorite times of the year, if not the favorite. Spring's pretty cool too. They're all cool. What can I say? I love the world. So fall is harvest time, of course. It's the time of the lung. It's time where our body starts to, the emotion of the lung is grief too. And I think grief starts to come up for people in the fall too. It's something I don't know if anybody's ever noticed before, but if you've had a loss in your life, it can be a family member, a pet, or a job or something, some sort of loss. There's a lot of processing that happens. There's so much excitement in summer, and then in fall things start to slow down and the body starts to kind of catch up a little bit and starts to process. So seasonal affective and stuff may even start in the fall for some people from the Western model. So we don't want to keep pushing ourselves like we did in the summer during fall. We want to really think about eating more food, getting prepared for winter, slowing down, processing our emotions, chilling out a little bit. It's a very dry time of year in most places too. That's why we have a lot more fires in California in the fall usually. Hopefully not this year. We got some rain finally. It's usually time when upper respiratory infections start coming in too. The dry damages the lungs, as they say. The invasion of the cold as the temperature is changing starts to come into the system. So you can get more colds and flus and all that kind of stuff, of course. And I'm already seeing that just after the first month of school here. So this is a time when you want to consume more moistening and overall nourishing foods. And eating seasonally is about what's local in your environment, which I'll get to a little bit later in this talk. Like I have an orchard in my backyard with apples and pears and plums and all this good stuff. So it's time of year where those are in season and they're fresh. You can pick them in your backyard or you can get them at your local farmer's market. That's the time to do that. So you have permission to do this in the summer. I know these things are also high in sugar and some constitutions aren't good for that, but let's just say if your system is able to handle this, these are some general philosophies to follow. Spicy is a little bit better in the autumn too because it's dispersing. It's supposed to help warm your body, get rid of that cold infiltration, as they say, as the temperature's changing, prevent viral infections. So you can do that with all kinds of stuff, but here's a few examples. The daikon radish is something that they really love a lot in traditional Chinese. It's actually really tasty, honestly. You can eat it. I could eat it raw, honestly. It does have a nice little pungency to it. Ginger, of course, you can do ginger tea. You can do fresh ginger. You can do ginger and a lot of things, actually. Foods that support qi and spleen function. Yeah, that's a good time. Starchy root vegetables. Here's your yams, your potatoes, carrots, radish, beets. Yeah, fall is just full of stuff. What could I say? Mushrooms are coming. Really good for your immune system. Very bland. As long as you don't have an allergy to them, they have so many benefits in the body. Zero sugar, good protein, lots of nutrients, good for your immune system. And hey, put some sour foods in there. Like my grapes are about ready too on my grapevine. Yeah, good stuff. Some of them are actually quite sweet right now. We got some rain, so it was great. Pomegranates, throw some grapefruit in there. All good. Plums, I have a plum tree too, by the way. Good stuff. So that's autumn. My favorite time of year. You can eat a lot of food, and you can also take some of that food and try to preserve it for winter. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later, because you have such a great bounty in autumn time. So the winter time is the time when you slow down. It's the peak in time. So it's the season of the Cang, meaning to reserve or recharge. So people are like, well, I don't want to slow down too much. I'm going to maybe gain some weight. It's considered okay to gain some weight during winter. Now, over consuming alcohol and sweets during the holidays, I'm not saying that is the best thing to do, even though it's enjoyable. And if it's just one time a year, have fun. But normally, as your system is slowing down and trying to consolidate its energy, you will gain a little bit of weight in the winter. But just remember, you will most likely burn it off in the spring. So you've eaten a bunch in the fall. You've kind of got a little bear fat for the winter. Now you're more still. Things are slowing down. Hopefully you've maybe preserved some of your foods for the winter if you can. You can do that with root vegetables. I mean, you can even nowadays freeze apples or other things. That's what they do in the store pretty much as well. You can do canning. You can do pickling if you don't have histamine issues. Sometimes pickling isn't as good in that case. There's a lot you could do. Dehydration, dehydrators. You can always grow winter greens, especially like in California in some places, or if you have a greenhouse, you could still do that, or microgreens or sprouts. I'll talk more about those in springtime, but there's a lot of stuff you can still get going in the winter. Otherwise, people do fall back on grains and other dried goods usually around this time, and you can still do your meats, of course. If there's any reasons why you can't do that stuff, I'll talk more about doing more carnivorous things at the end here as well. So these are just some general foods that are considered awesome in the winter. Ginger, garlic. Yes, you can dry your garlic from the harvest in the fall and integrate that into all your different foods. And when I mean canned foods, I don't mean like store cans. I mean like maybe mason jar canning where you do it yourself. It's fresh and doesn't have a bunch of extra chemicals and preservatives and things like that in it. Ideally, you know. Uh, Limit cold and raw and damp promoting foods. So yeah, as much fun as it is to get ice cream in the winter, you know. And there's your holiday yumminess, the alcohol and the sweets again. Yeah, well, it's just one time, 1 week. It's probably fine. But is it ever? I don't know. So kanji, I don't know if anybody's heard of kanji, but kanji is really cool. During the winter too, just like the fall, you definitely want to think about supporting the immune system. So, and if you've had a lot of gut issues too, like you don't feel like you assimilate food very well, or you have a lot of food sensitivities, it's possible you might tolerate a kanji. Now you have to be able to tolerate rice at a base level. I think I've seen some recipes that might use quinoa too, but you kind of just slow cook the rice overnight and you make this sort of watery porridge, and then you can throw a whole bunch of different stuff in it that you may want. So you might, for immune system function, put mushrooms in there or something like that. Uh, you might put these root vegetables in them as well. You might put some dates in there for sweetness, for sort of non-sugar sweetening. You can add some chicken stock in there. You can put spices in there if you like. I put some resources at the end that have a lot of kanji recipes. You can search for a whole bunch of them online. I think what's most fun with kanji is just to be creative and make your own and do what feels good to you and your body. If you're feeling really cold and you have a viral infection, put more warming stuff in there. You know, it's fun. And then also you could just make soups and stews and different things like this. You can put ginger, green onion, garlic, all that good stuff in there too. Really makes it warming and really makes it tasty. And then teas, because there's like herbal tea, but the traditional word tea is really referring to the green tea family, Camellia sinensis. There's green tea, oolong, and black tea, three types. So green tea is really cooling, kind of non-adulterated, has the most antioxidants in it. Oolong is more neutral, sort of intermediate, and then black tea is more warming, energetically speaking, but higher oxidation. So depending on your constitution, you may do better with one or the other. And then of course, you can do herbal teas as well. There are plenty of herbal teas out there that are really tasty and yummy. Here's some examples. Chrysanthemum, used quite a bit. It's good for the eyes, especially, I think. It's also good for just acute colds and that kind of thing. It has a pretty nice taste, especially when it's combined with honey. And if you can get a local honey, all the better too. Local honey can be good for allergies, histamines, and you can get a lot of antioxidants in there as well. Ginger tea, of course, rose hips, vitamin C, a lot more than that out there. Just named a few. So yeah, and I mentioned here already how to eat through winter. I think there are some foods that are still available in the winter, like say mushrooms, for example. You might still be able to find mushrooms if you know what you're looking for, or you can grow your own mushrooms too. It's really actually not that hard. I've done that before. Otherwise, you could probably find them at even local farmers markets in the winter. So I'm a big fan of mushrooms, as you can imagine. And then the dehydration, if you get a dehydrator, that makes this a lot easier. You can do that with a lot of different things. You can do that with your fruit harvest even, which is great. Canning is really fun with mason jars. You know, use glass. Try not to use plastic, metal, other things if you can help it. Pickling is really fun, even though, like I said, it's not always mast cell friendly or histamine friendly, but it's still fun. Wintergreens are really exciting. You can grow those yourself inside if you had a greenhouse even sometimes. You can do like kale and chard outside a lot of times in places. Sometimes if it gets into deep freezes, they don't work as well, but it's still cool. And you can actually freeze stuff too, honestly. You can freeze fruits, like you can freeze blueberries or raspberries or whatever, and they kind of get stuck in time there. So you could theoretically do that in the modern world. Spring. yeah, so I kind of ending on spring because that's kind of when we're kind of coming full circle again back to right before um, summer. So it's a time of Sheng, meaning birth and revival. The yang is rising. This is when a lot of animals, are having their babies and everything too. It's the time of birth. It's the time of reproduction and everything as well. It's time for detoxification. It's a time that stillness is starting to move again. Your body's starting to wake back up. You're maybe inclined to go into motion again, to engage more, to do more things. Sprouts and buds can help quite a bit. Light, sweet, and light pungent foods and flavors are usually good. And here's some examples. Buds are really interesting to me because there's rose buds, and there's even a system called gemotherapy here that I learned about in I think my first year of medical school. I've been meaning to kind of come back to it, but it uses a lot of the buds of trees, and a lot of it is about regenerative function and detoxification and movement. It has a sort of energetic element to it, but it's also just full of nutrients. It's sort of the potential of the leaf, the potential energy of the leaf. So when you're eating these sprouts and you're eating these microgreens and you're eating these buds and all this kind of stuff, you're getting a lot of potential energy and movement and motion there. And that can be quite powerful in the spring because it's going to help you detox better. It's going to give you more readily available nutrients. And it gives you some interesting flavors too, by the way, more aromatic with a lot of the buds of these different trees. So sour foods are good at this time of year. It's the time of the liver. So we're supposed to be once again detoxing, and hopefully that also means detoxing some of our emotions once again, or kind of working through some of the processing, getting ready to take off to soar in the summer, so to speak. And then here are a bunch of green leafy vegetables and stuff that you can also use during this time that are usually pretty fresh. So more teas and stuff because there's still probably some viral stuff hanging out. So that was my seasonal wrap up. Got about half hour here. I'm gonna talk more about it probably through the rest of this talk, but I'm gonna take a pause for the cause with sensitivity syndromes and mast cell disorders, because a lot of these general frameworks that I presented are well and good. If you like, oh, I have the constitution of yin deficiency, so I'm gonna do these foods and I'm going to pay attention at this particular season and I'm going to try to be easier on my body and not push myself and all that kind of thing. But when you have a thing that enters into the system, it can shift your base state. Some people even believe it can shift your constitution sometimes. So mast cell disorders, I kind of put a general, maybe overcomplicated explanation here, but I think people with mast cell issues they clearly have a lot of heat in their system. They have a lot of what we call wind in their system in Chinese medicine. Symptoms can change very quickly. And they end up getting a lot of depletion over time. This heat response burns the yin fluids, ultimately enroots the yang. I think that maybe is explained a little bit by the autonomic dysregulation or dysautonomia that can be associated with mast cell disorders. And the person can become very depleted nutrient wise. So that's something that you have to consider. And what's problematic about these conditions mostly is that foods that you used to be able to tolerate, that maybe you thought were really yummy, that did really well for you, you can't necessarily eat now. You're having more sensitivity responses, and it becomes a struggle. Yet you do need these core nutrients to still thrive, clearly. So not everybody can just go and do IV nutrients and replace food. It's not that simple. The core micro macronutrients, there's more to food than just that, than just those. There's more to food than just that. So general philosophy is to try to implement more cooling foods in practice for these individuals. But I think what's most important is you need things that are easy to assimilate to. And you have to avoid things that can initiate or worsen that heat or mast cell response. So there's not a one size fits all for these disorders, I'd have to say. You do I think you want to look at the Constitution, where people were, what they did with before. If they never did well with dairy or gluten, I mean, those are off the table in a mast cell situation too, of course. But I encourage people to do a detailed diet diary, see what their relative safe foods are, and then see if there are patterns that form out of that. If there's certain types of foods that they might do well with, that they might do better than others. And what you'll find is that some people narrow things down to a sometimes concerningly short list, and it might fit somewhere in the paleo world where they can do a few types of meats and then maybe a few types of plants or something like this. And then they may have random ones they can just do that don't follow any pattern whatsoever. And that's fine. So you have to look at the individual in these cases. You have to diary what you can do and cannot do, and then have a conversation with your practitioner and kind of see what you can do from there. So as I mentioned, ideally I would be applying more cooling foods when possible. Example, maybe bitters. Maybe bitters would be good. I had mentioned how mast cell disorders can affect autonomic function. Their gut starts to slow down. The bitters might stimulate digestive function, get their juices going again, help them assimilate better, and help their motility, and kind of prime their autonomic nervous system. Perfect example. Sometimes people do better without plants, though. Some of my more severe situations, I've gone into the carnivore land. I think it's important to have a pause for carnivore and what it may mean. In the context of traditional Chinese medicine, when somebody is eating a lot of meat and animal proteins, they're consuming something that is very similar to them, like a mammal. We're a mammal, they're a mammal. The ability to quickly and easily assimilate that protein, those nutrients, those organs, if you eat organs, into the body is much simpler. So people that have gone through all of this and are really deplete, sometimes the animals can give them energy. It can make them feel a little bit better. If they have hypermobility stuff too, it's giving them collagen. It's giving them stuff to support connective tissue. So sometimes their body has less pain or they feel a little more stable. But that doesn't mean they'll tolerate every single meat. Some people, it's like, I can tolerate chicken and lamb. That's about it. That's fine. Why might vegetables be a problem with some of these people? Well, a lot of vegetables have defense mechanisms that are supposed to keep you from eating them too, like oxalates or lectins. And there's a lot of other constituents out there too. People may not do well with nightshades. Autoimmune paleo rotates out a lot of different constituents here. For example, eliminates them and then rechallenges them. So you could see if your body is having a problem with those defense mechanisms that are innate in the plant. And sometimes if the mast cell response or the gut is really flared, really triggered, there's very little they can do in that world. And if they do have motility issues like SIBO, so small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or small intestine fungal overgrowth, SIFO, or anything else like that, then some of these vegetables will only make that problem worse. They may then over ferment. And then on top of that, a lot of inflammation can also lead to insulin resistance. There's a lot of other pieces to the puzzle sometimes. And so low glycemic or low insulin diets are sometimes helpful in those cases. So if you bring all that together, you can see why some people have looked to carnivore as a possible answer, maybe a temporary answer while you're working through the healing process. Otherwise, paleo allows for some vegetables as well. So you kind of have a vegetable and meat sort of interface. Autoimmune paleo, as I said, goes through and eliminates a lot of the common challenges. And of course, there are histamine foods, foods that contain histamine, and then foods that induce histamine. There's an exhaustive list of those out there. I'll try to include it at the end if I didn't put it in there for resources. You can easily find that online too. So that's a good framework to start with as well. But it's challenging to navigate, I'd have to say. And you could certainly bring in other support like medications like cromolyn or quercetin, or any of the flavonoids or antioxidants, which incidentally come from plants. Cromolyn, though it's a prescription, comes from a plant called Kella. So it is kind of using foods in some ways to calm down or clear the heat of the mast cell response. So it's kind of a cool thing. But once again, it's a bigger conversation. So definitely work with a practitioner or a nutritionist that understands mast cell disorders, and maybe work integratively too if you do need medications or anything, prescriptions or anything higher order to keep you stable so you can eat food, so you can eat more food. You could always try doing gut resets with like elemental briefly with some of these. Elemental diet is when you kind of get down to the very basics of amino acids and minerals and B vitamins, and you do that for a very short amount of time to sort of shut off some of the responsiveness of the gut. 3 days, 2 or 3 days, or something like that. You could do that with inflammatory bowel syndrome. Sometimes it works with some mast cell too, and then reintroduce food back in there. But the best thing to do in these cases is to keep people eating, because not eating doesn't usually serve them, even if you're taking a lot of oral nutrients otherwise. It's also our relationship around food. We don't really want to turn food into an enemy in our life. We want to enjoy it too. Absolutely. It's very enjoyable. So eating locally, I'm going to shift gears a little bit again. So, eating locally, there's a lot of benefits to doing that, as you can imagine. I mean, obviously you're supporting local farmers. You're not supporting the big agricultural industry that has put toxins into our environment, glyphosate and various things, and depleted the soil and reduced our overall nutrient content of the food that we eat. You're supporting more mom and pop places. Obviously, you're reducing the carbon footprint. You're not getting stuff from Venezuela or somewhere far away when you can just get it in your backyard. There's also this concept of supporting the microbiome. I'm going to kind of get to that on a different slide. And I mentioned already optimization of your nutrient potential. Your local farmers, the smaller farms tend to not have as much of those depleted soils, and also minimal processing between harvest and getting to you means better nutrient content. And also, hey, you can eat seasonally. You don't have to look for, unless they're frozen or something, there's not going to be a blueberry in January, usually, if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere. So it kind of forces you to eat seasonally, doesn't it? So what are some ways to eat locally? Well, of course, there's the farmers market. There's the community supported agriculture, or CSA. I think I looked up the differences in these terms, but they're very similar. Farm shares, co-ops. Basically, you're seeing community chipping in to provide funds for farming so that the farmers get some of those funds up front. So they're not waiting for their harvest. Like, not everybody has a bunch of money to just wait for their harvest to get paid. So this allows people to have more financial security, and then the community gets a return on it. So pretty brilliant. Community gardens, those are smaller scale, but I've seen some beautiful community gardens. You can get a lot of tomatoes, for example, from that. a lot of basic stuff, but there's still abundance there, I have to say. And of course, growing your own food. If you even have like a 1/4 acre property, there's a lot of food you can grow in raised beds, you can grow in greenhouses. You can do indoor greens, as I mentioned. You can get a grow light, do your microgreens. There's all kinds of stuff you can do on your own. And I was just mentioning, check the country or region of origin at your local store. So, like I said, if you're trying to eat local, don't get everything from Mexico necessarily. Let's see here. So the microbiome. So it's believed that our microbiome, our immune system adapts to the local biome as we develop. So kids are putting their hands in their mouth or eating dirt and all that crazy stuff. So you develop immune tolerance to the biome that is around you, and that includes the food that you eat. And if you look at a profile of an entire family, they all look quite similar. They may have different amounts of different things, but the family portrait, so to speak, of microbiome is actually quite similar. So you can imagine what may happen then if your food is also a source of microbiome inoculations and diversification and all this kind of stuff, that if you're getting food from halfway across the world with somebody else's biome somewhere else, even if you wash your vegetables, you can't completely sterilize the world, that could be harming the gut too. And I think one of the biggest problems is our society and a lot of the world has overused antibiotics, reducing our diversity to begin with. They've used antibiotics or sterilization procedures in agriculture and food and everything for a long time, sometimes for good reason. I mean, certainly. But it's left us with a very low diversity of our microbiome. So if you can cook foods in your backyard, if you can harvest foods in your backyard from the soil in the area that you live, work, and sleep and everything, you might be doing your gut a service. This is still actively being studied, but I just wanted to put a plug in for how important this might be, because what's most important in microbiome is diversity and continuing to diversify. So adding a little bit of weird stuff from somewhere else might not necessarily be a problem for some people, but if they have a really sensitive gut and sensitive constitution, they might have more tolerance to that which is normally around them. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, so I'm going to take some time for questions. I included some resources here. I'm going to share these slides eventually. So I will also put a list of histamine foods and histamine inducing foods on the bottom of this or on the next page. So community supported agriculture, somebody reached out to me and gave me this website. So there's a lot of information here. I recommend going to that. Dr. Haas here wrote a book, I think in like 1981, about staying healthy with the seasons, and I think he updated it as well. So that was pretty cool. You can take a look at that too. And then here's a few traditional Chinese medicine sources, cookbooks, recipes, different things like that I looked into a little further. And this is a really in-depth book, maybe a little more academic, but still, if you really want to dive into traditional Chinese medicine, this book is pretty awesome. It does a really good job of interfacing Eastern, Western philosophies and really parceling out what Chinese medicine is all about. All right, so let's get to questions. Thank you guys so far for hanging in there. Q&A.
Okay, so you may have already answered this, but is it true that as you eat foods that agree with your constitution, that oxalates and to some extent lectins are not problematic?
If you eat foods that agree with your constitution, sometimes, that's the interesting thing about that, because I've come to realize that whenever you just across the board stop all oxalate activity and all lectin activity, it might be okay for a little while, but you sometimes can add some of them back in. So foods that might be better for your constitution might be the first ones to add back in that variety when you're rechallenging later.
There is a question here about the different constitutions and the yin and yang deficiency. Can you be both? How would somebody know what their constitution really is?
Yeah, honestly, well, I want to qualify my statement. You can present as both, but it is basically a progression of the process. So you want to try to look back further to see what your true constitution is. So what I mean by that is a yin deficient person will eventually become yang deficient, because that unrooted yang will just burn out if you push it too hard. It needs to be balanced. So any one of these can turn into something that looks like other things. It can be a combo pack. But the original OG constitution was probably one thing. So you have to go back into the history a little bit more.
How do you work with your patients in terms of incorporating their constitution into their protocols? And
well, I honestly feel I probably should be more transparent with that. I'm kind of always thinking about these things when I'm talking to people about, when my first visit, we spend 2 hours together, as a lot of practitioners in this field do, and we really dive into childhood and where they used to be and where they were. And I do try to then make recommendations in different arenas, whether they be foods or whether they be herbs or medications or other things like this that sort of fit more into that. So I just try to think of resonance, I guess, that if this person is a constitution, I'm going to maybe avoid doing something over here because there's a higher risk that they're going to have probably an agitation or a sensitivity reaction. And I know I'm being super vague, but I'm always kind of thinking about this as I'm deciding what I want to recommend for people. But I do admit too, I should be more transparent probably with people that like, I think you're this constitution and I'm going to give you this. Maybe I'll start doing that.
All right. Another question on the congee stews. Is it something that you can prepare in advance and freeze and reheat, or is that not recommended?
I mean, I think you can theoretically. I know the mast cell thing is all about fresh as possible too. They say that if leftovers foods can sometimes accumulate histamines or be more histamine inducing. So if you have any disorders in that arena, you may want to be careful about you want to do things fresh basically. And I know that the arrangement of the carbohydrate is different whenever it's cooked the first time versus when it's reheated the second time. I think there's a test from Cyrex or something, one of these companies that measures the different reactivities to the different states of food. So sometimes I try, if people have a lot of reactivities, I tell them try to just eat fresh the best you can. But honestly, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. If it's out of necessity, go for it. But just be aware.
That's great. So when you're talking about eating for the seasons, there was a question about what do you do if you live in a place that has no cold? Let's say you live in Hawaii.
Yeah,
How
that's
how do
fair.
you suggest the eating for the seasons?
That is really interesting. I would say that there probably is. See, I've never lived in Hawaii for all 4 seasons, so I can't say that I know for sure. But I would imagine that there is still seasonal movement within traditional food sources. Now, a lot of things have been cultivated too, and when you're in a hot tropical climate, you can grow stuff like all year round. I mean, you have a long growing season. California has a long growing season. That's why there's so much agriculture there. So you can do more than one round of crops. So we've kind of gotten a little bit away from that. I think you'd have to kind of go back to some of the traditional or indigenous roots there and to try to understand what's appropriate for Hawaiian, you know, seasonal movement. That's my suggestion.
Okay. Um, Someone's asking, how would you know if you have mast cell disorder?
That's a good question. You don't always know. You have to, it's predominantly a clinical diagnosis, I'd have to say, right now. There are tests that you can do though, and if you're working with a practitioner that understands mast cell disorders, there are tests that you can run. But generally speaking, unfortunately, we're just not that far along with the technology of being very clear objectively. Like, here's a lab, let's do it. Even the labs that you can do are just a pain sometimes, and they don't always give you the answer you're looking for. So oftentimes we'll treat it like it's a mast cell disorder in some way. Maybe we'll do a low histamine diet for a little bit, or maybe we'll do some cromolyn or some antihistamines or something like that for a little bit. And sometimes that gives us our answer, actually. That if you avoid the triggers that have a mast cell pattern, then you are better. So then you're like, oh, okay. Or the medications that work for mast cell work for you. So I know it's not a perfect medicine yet, but work with a provider that's well read in mast cell, and they still don't know everything.
um, here's a good little question for you. Could you comment on the health benefits of buying from local farmers that are not pesticide free versus
Ooh.
organic produce, which is shipped all over the world?
That's a really good question. I would still venture to say that, okay, so I have to qualify the statement too, because I think that a lot of my patients, I don't necessarily want them to have any extra chemicals or pesticides or glyphosate in their life. And honestly, glyphosate is something I have a big problem with because it doesn't really clear the system very effectively. It just keeps accumulating. So I've had a I think old me would have said local was priority regardless, and then new me is kind of very much more strict on the toxin arrangement. That being said, I think that the term organic is thrown around loosely too. I think that if you go to like Fred Meyer or Rayleigh's Organic, or one of those stores that's like pretty chained up in their organics, I can really taste the difference between that and like a local farmer's market organic food, and who knows where that stuff is really coming from. I don't think there's as much vitality in that food. I think that you will taste the difference even with the chemicals in your local food arrangement. So I would just really be clear, like, what are you using and how much stuff are you using? Because there's still stuff that they're using in organic farming. They just don't talk about it. Like they can use glyphosate at the end of processing for drying purposes and still be listed as organic. So anyway,
That's terrible.
yeah.
All right, I I had store-bought Ezekiel bread and ate it daily all week. On the fifth day, I had critical low blood sugar in the mid 50s for an hour and a half after eating it. This happened once in July as well when I ate store-bought bagels. Could gluten intolerance be the main reason?
Certainly could be. Gluten sort of is a building effect. Well, let's just say if you have celiac and you're really sensitive, I have a patient that it'll just completely rip up her gut if there's like a micro amount of it. But people with gluten sensitivities, non-celiac, it seems to have an accumulated effect. They can get away with maybe one meal or two meals, but three or four aren't good. Their sensitivity reactions tend to have a delay to them too, what they call delay sensitivity responses. They can be 3, 4, 5 days after an initial insult. So as a result, you may not immediately see the connection between those two things. You could feel pretty terribly several days down the road after an insult. But that's a good way to re-challenge a food. Like when we do elimination re-challenge, eat that food for like 3 or 5 days and you'll know if it's not good for you. That same kind of stuff will happen to those people. And you're like, that food's off the list. No, not right now. Maybe later, not right now.
That's great. If someone needs gut healing and would like to try more of a carnivore focus to decrease plant lectins and oxalates, but they don't do well with more than about a half a cup of meat, what do you recommend? This particular person has a blood type, and tolerating less meat is consistent with if you're following the blood type diet.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, I would try preparing things more too and seeing if it's like an assimilation thing as well. Like if they slow cooked it or if they did like a stew or something, is that a different experience? You know, could they tolerate more of it if it was very easy and simple to assimilate, or are they just having a generalized reaction? Same thing goes, if you want to try something more nutrient dense, if you tried like an organ meat, for example, which not everybody wants to do, but they have capsulated organ extracts and stuff even, which I don't really love, but if it's fresh, probably better. But you can see if they have the same response because it's a small portion, but it's very, very, very nutrient and vitamin dense even. So I would start with the preparation and see if there was a difference there. I would diversify the meat as well, like try more types of meat because you can find places that have other exotic meats, even venison or elk or something like that. I would try a different type and see if they do better with it because, yeah, they might have something they could do.
Do you have any other system other than an elimination diet for determining what foods you should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, there are frameworks of testing for sure. Like you could test IgGs, IgAs, and all that kind of stuff, like US Biotech or one of those labs. You can do the 220 or whatever 10 array panel from Cyrex that checks the different states of the food as well. You can do white blood cell or lymphocyte response testing. There's a whole bunch of different types of tests that are out there. It's just not one of them is perfect. But what you can do with it is you can use it as a framework and say, oh yeah. And like I said, the diet diary is also incredibly useful. So you have to kind of bring together three things. You could have your test to just give a little map. You can do your elimination re-challenge, and prior to all that, hopefully you already did your diet diary. So if you bring all those things together, you can hopefully better understand. And you also have to understand the delayed response. So that's why elimination is so key.
That's great. How does eating seasonally relate to the season of life one is in? For example, menopause. Would one want to eat with seasons or the symptoms they're experiencing?
Yeah, so that's another example where it's not like it exactly shifts your constitution per se. You might still be you, but it certainly shifts your default state, so to speak. So you become more yin deficient during menopausal time. So as a result, you might do more yin nourishing things in winter, but you don't want to do too hot and spicy of things in the fall or any time of the year. So you want to go for more cooling, like root vegetables, cooked, easy to digest and assimilate, that kind of stuff, more moistening foods, and or at least balancing your diet. Like if you do better with meat or something like that, just balancing the diet with cooling greens, cooked stir fried stuff like that even. So there's a lot you could do. Bitter stuff might be okay. Yeah. So yeah, it just changes the way that you operate. So in the summer you might have more problems. In the winter you might do more to try to nourish, so to speak. So you just adjust for that appropriately. Try to keep yourself cool in the summer, keep more cooling foods in the summer.
Great. Is it okay to eat mushrooms with possible mold exposure or yeast?
I get that question a lot. It's not inherently a problem. Some people do get cross reactivities. There have been theoretical concerns out there for sure. I think you definitely want to try to eat as fresh of mushrooms as possible, wash them and everything. Don't let them sit and get moldy because that can happen with them as well. And if you're harvesting them and you know how to wild harvest too, you definitely want to get like the freshest, just out the ground varieties. Uh, but yeah, there's a possibility of cross reactions, but I can't say that all my patients with mold problems have had this. In fact, I think it's more rare than people lead it. In my experience, in my personal experience, I think it's more rare.
Okay. Last question as we wrap up is about you. What other foods do you grow on your 1 acre along with the fruit trees? And do you have to hire help to maintain it?
Well, I have a greenhouse and I have like a little garden in the back. Uh, and so I'd say that if I had more help to maintain it, I probably would have grown a lot more this year. It is a lot of work, I have to say. And if you have people helping you, that's why it's great if you have kids you can put to work, or you have, a neighbor that wants to share your space or something like that. There's a lot of things that you can do to try to divide the time. So yeah, basically I've had let's see what I've had. Yeah, peppers, beets, tomatoes, garlic, onions, chard, kale. I know I'm missing stuff. Uh, yeah, there's various varieties. I had watermelon, I had squash, I had pumpkin. Uh, yeah, fair amount, but I could have done more.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And the replay will be going out early next week via email. And we will also be sending you Dr. Kunkle's slides.
Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your questions. Have a great day.